Fate can change in the blink of an eye. A millionaire's car broke down on the side of the road. A poor black boy stepped forward to help. But the choice he made that day? It changed his life forever. What happened next will leave you speechless. Watch till the end to find out. The summer heat was merciless, draping over the small Alabama town like a thick wool blanket. The cracked asphalt of the lone highway shimmered under the scorching sun, and the distant hum of cicadas filled the air with an almost hypnotic rhythm. A few rusted cars rumbled past, their tires kicking up dust as they sped down the road. 15-year-old Jamal Carter wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked along the sidewalk, his worn-out sneakers scraping against the pavement. His backpack, tattered at the edges, bounced lightly against his back with each step. Inside, he carried a few old textbooks, a notebook filled with his neat handwriting, and a single pencil worn down to a stub. Jamal was no stranger to hardship. He had grown up in a small, one-bedroom house with his mother, Angela Carter, a waitress at a local diner who worked double shifts just to keep food on the table. His father had left when Jamal was 6, disappearing without a word. But despite the struggles, Jamal had something that set him apart, a heart full of kindness and an unshakable determination to rise above his circumstances. As he neared the gas station at the edge of town, he noticed something unusual, a sleek black Mercedes-Benz parked on the side of the road, one of its tires completely deflated. The car, pristine and luxurious, looked out of place in a town where most people drove beat-up pickups or aging sedans. Beside the car stood Jonathan Blake, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, his phone pressed against his ear. His forehead was creased with frustration as he checked his watch. Jonathan was a self-made millionaire, the CEO of a thriving tech company, and a man who had long since forgotten what it was like to struggle. Jamal hesitated for only a moment before making his decision. He knew most people in this town would walk right past, assuming the well-dressed man would call a tow truck or have someone from the city come to his aid. But Jamal had been raised differently. He had been taught that kindness wasn't about who deserved it, it was about doing the right thing, even when no one was watching. Taking a deep breath, he approached. "Excuse me, sir," Jamal said politely. "Looks like you got a flat. Need some help?" Jonathan looked up, surprised. His eyes flicked over Jamal's simple attire, an old t-shirt, jeans slightly too short, and sneakers that had seen better days. For a moment he hesitated. Could this kid really help? Jamal, sensing the doubt, smiled reassuringly. "My uncle taught me how to change a tire last summer. I can get you back on the road in no time." Jonathan sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. His day had already been stressful, meetings, deadlines, calls that never seemed to end. The last thing he needed was a flat tire in the middle of nowhere. But something about the boy's confidence made him nod. "All right, kid," Jonathan said. "Let's see what you can do." Jamal grinned and got to work, unaware that this simple act of kindness was about to change his life forever. Jamal crouched beside the Mercedes, carefully positioning the jack under the car. He had seen his uncle do this a dozen times, and though his hands were smaller, his movements were precise. As he cranked the handle, lifting the heavy car inch by inch, he could feel Jonathan Blake's eyes on him, watching, assessing. The heat was relentless, beads of sweat forming on Jamal's forehead and trickling down his back. But he didn't complain. He had been through worse, long walks to school in the rain, nights when the electricity flickered out because the bill hadn't been paid. Hardship was nothing new. Jonathan checked his watch again. His impatience was clear, but he said nothing. The boy was working fast, and to his surprise, competently. "You do this often?" Jonathan finally asked, crossing his arms. Jamal shrugged. "Not really, but I help my uncle at his auto shop sometimes." He loosened the lug nuts with a grunt. "Figured you might be in a hurry, so I thought I'd stop and help." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. A teenager with manners. That was rare these days. Just as Jamal removed the flat tire, a loud honk shattered the quiet. A dusty red pickup pulled up alongside them, its engine sputtering. From inside, 3 boys around Jamal's age leaned out the window. "Yo, Jamal," one of them called, a smirk plastered across his face. It was Trey Wilson, a kid from Jamal's school. "Didn't know you were running a pit crew now." You charging this rich dude or just working for free? The other boys laughed. Marcus and Darnell, Trey's usual crew, joined in, their voices dripping with mockery. Jamal clenched his jaw, his hands tightening around the tire iron. He had known Trey since elementary school, but they had grown apart over the years. Trey ran with a different crowd now, one that took pride in skipping school, talking back to teachers, and never missing an opportunity to put others down. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Jamal. He could see the boy's posture stiffen, the way his fingers curled into fists before he forced himself to relax. Just helping out, Jamal said evenly, trying to keep his voice steady. Trey snorted. Man, that's your problem. Always playing the nice guy. Bet this dude ain't even gonna say thank you. His eyes flicked to Jonathan. Ain't that right, mister? Jonathan exhaled sharply, his patience thinning. Look, kid, if you're trying to start something, don't. This young man is helping me because he chose to. That's more than I can say for any of you. Trey's grin faltered. He hadn't expected the rich guy to stand up for Jamal. Jamal swallowed hard. He wanted to tell Trey to leave, to tell him that kindness wasn't weakness, but he knew it wouldn't change anything. People like Trey saw the world differently. To them, everything was a hustle. If you weren't taking, you were getting taken. Whatever, man, Trey muttered, waving Jamal off. Keep wasting your time. The truck roared away, kicking up dust as it disappeared down the road. Jonathan studied Jamal for a long moment. Friends of yours? Jamal exhaled, shaking his head. Used to be. Jonathan nodded slowly. He recognized that look in the boy's eyes, the struggle of choosing between the easy path and the right one. You handled that well, Jonathan said. Jamal forced a small smile. I just know who I want to be. Jonathan felt something stir inside him, something unexpected. He had met countless people in his life, but this boy, there was something different about him. Something rare. And in that moment, a thought took root in Jonathan's mind. This wasn't just a kid who had stopped to help. This was someone special. Someone worth investing in. Jamal had no idea that the course of his life had just shifted. And soon he would find out why. Jamal finished tightening the last lug nut and wiped his hands on the side of his jeans. The new tire sat firmly in place, and the once-stranded Mercedes now stood roadworthy again. Jonathan inspected Jamal's work, impressed by how quickly and efficiently he had handled the task. The boy didn't just know what he was doing, he cared about doing it right. That was rare. Jonathan reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. Here, you earned it. Jamal looked at the money, then up at Jonathan. For a moment he hesitated. It was a lot of money, more than his mom made in a whole shift at the diner. But something in him resisted. Thanks, sir, but I can't take that, Jamal said, shaking his head. Jonathan's eyebrows lifted. Why not? Jamal rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't do it for money. You needed help, so I helped. That's just what you're supposed to do. Jonathan studied him for a long second, then let out a low chuckle. That's a rare attitude, kid. Jamal shrugged, but his mind was already elsewhere. As much as he tried to brush off what had happened with Trey and his friends, their words still lingered. Bet this dude ain't even gonna say thank you. Jamal had spent his whole life trying to be good, believing that kindness always paid off. But what if it didn't? What if Trey was right? Before he could dwell on it too long, Jonathan pocketed the bill and reached into the car instead, pulling out a business card. He handed it to Jamal. If you ever change your mind about accepting help, call me, Jonathan said. I don't believe in luck, but I believe in people who work hard. And you, Jamal, are one of them. Jamal took the card, feeling its weight in his palm. He glanced down. Jonathan Blake, see, Blake Innovations. It sounded important. Thanks, Jamal said, slipping the card into his backpack. But I should probably get going. My mom's expecting me. Jonathan nodded, watching as Jamal slung his backpack over his shoulder and started walking. Something told him this wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. That evening, Jamal sat at the kitchen table, the business card resting in front of him. The small house smelled of frying oil and cornbread, and the sound of his mother humming drifted in from the kitchen. Angela Carter was a force of nature. A woman who had fought against life's hardships with nothing but sheer willpower and love for her son. She entered the room, wiping her hands on a dish towel. You've been staring at that card for 20 minutes. What's on your mind, baby? Jamal sighed. I helped this guy today. His car broke down. Turns out he's some rich Angela raised an eyebrow. And? He offered me $100, but I didn't take it. Angela's lips curled into a small, proud smile. That's my boy. Jamal nodded, but he didn't feel as certain. Trey and the guys saw me helping him. They said I was being dumb for not charging him. Angela's expression darkened. You know better than to listen to those boys. Jamal frowned. But what if they're right? What if the world isn't about being kind? What if it's about taking what you can? Angela sat down across from him, her eyes gentle but firm. Jamal, you don't do good expecting something back. You do it because it's who you are. And trust me, the world has a way of rewarding people who stay true to themselves. Jamal wanted to believe that, but he also knew life wasn't that simple. Still, he nodded. Yeah. You're right, Mama. Angela reached over and squeezed his hand. You'll see, baby. Just keep being you. The next day at school, Jamal was at his locker when Trey approached him again. You really turned down $100? Trey asked, shaking his head. That's crazy, man. Jamal shrugged. Didn't feel right. Trey scoffed. Man, you're too soft. That guy wouldn't have thought twice about taking money from you if the roles were reversed. Jamal frowned. You don't know that. Trey leaned in. I know how the world works. And I know a way you can make real money. Fast. Jamal narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? Trey smirked. Meet me after school. I'll show you. Jamal hesitated, but curiosity gnawed at him. He knew Trey was trouble, but what if he was missing out? Maybe just this once, he could see for himself. After school, Jamal followed Trey and his crew to an abandoned lot behind a gas station. A man in his late 20s leaned against a car, counting a wad of cash. This is Reggie, Trey said. He's got a little side hustle. Just needs some help moving product. Jamal's stomach twisted. He wasn't stupid. He knew exactly what Trey meant. Man, I'm not trying to get involved in that, Jamal said. Trey laughed. Relax. It's easy money. No one gets hurt. Just deliver some stuff, and you'll be making more in a week than your mama makes in a month. Jamal clenched his fists. He thought about his mother, about the late nights she worked, about the bills she struggled to pay. He also thought about the business card in his backpack. 2 paths. 2 choices. One decision could change everything. Jamal looked up at Trey and took a deep breath. I'm out. Trey's smirk faded. You sure? Jamal nodded. Yeah. I know who I want to be. Trey shook his head. Suit yourself, man. Just don't come crying when you're still broke. As Jamal walked away, his heart pounded. He knew he had made the right choice. And maybe, just maybe, the world would reward him for it. The sun had barely begun to set when Jamal walked home, his heart still pounding from the confrontation with Trey. He could hear Trey's mocking voice in his head, just don't come crying when you're still broke. But Jamal had made his choice. Still, doubt clung to him like a shadow. Would life always be this hard? Would doing the right thing ever pay off? As he reached his street, the sharp honk of a car made him look up. The sleek black Mercedes-Benz from the day before was parked near his house. Jonathan Blake leaned against the hood, dressed in a crisp navy suit, his expression unreadable. Jamal's stomach tightened. What was he doing here? Taking a breath, he approached. Mr. Blake. Jonathan straightened. Jamal. I was hoping to catch you. Jamal glanced toward his house. His mother would be home soon. Everything okay? Jonathan nodded but then folded his arms. I've been thinking about you. About what you did yesterday. Jamal shifted on his feet. It wasn't a big deal. Jonathan scoffed. It was a very big deal. Not just fixing my tire, but turning down the money. Walking away from a quick win when others wouldn't. Jamal looked away. I don't want to be like that. I want to do things the right way. Jonathan studied him, then nodded slowly. I want to make you an offer, Jamal. Jamal blinked. An offer. Jonathan reached into his suit pocket and pulled out an envelope. I run a program, an internship for young people who show promise. It's competitive, but I can pull some strings. If you're interested, I can get you a spot. Jamal stared at the envelope, his mind reeling. An internship? A chance to work at a real company? This wasn't just an opportunity, it was a ticket out. But before he could speak, a sharp voice cut through the air. Whoa. Look who's getting special treatment. Jamal turned. Trey and his crew stood at the corner, watching. Trey's expression twisted into something bitter. Guess you really do think you're better than us. Jamal felt the heat rise in his chest. It's not like that. Trey stepped forward. Nah, it is. You turned down real money, but now you're gonna run off and be some rich dude's charity case. Jonathan's gaze hardened. You need to watch your tones, son. Trey scoffed. Man, whatever. Go ahead, Jamal. Go be his little project. But don't come back when you realize none of this is real. The words cut deep. Jamal clenched his fists. Part of him wanted to yell back, to prove Trey wrong. But another part of him, the part that knew who he wanted to be, stayed quiet. Instead, he turned to Jonathan. When does the internship start? Jonathan smiled. Monday. Jamal nodded. Then I'm in. Trey laughed bitterly. Guess we won't be seeing you around, huh? Jamal looked at him, really looked at him. Trey had already made his choice. And now, so had he. Without another word, Jamal turned toward his future. And he never looked back. The following Monday, Jamal stood in front of the towering glass building of Blake Innovations, clutching his backpack. He had never been inside a place like this before, where men and women in crisp suits moved with purpose, where the floors gleamed, and the air smelled of fresh coffee and ambition. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. A receptionist greeted him with a warm smile, directing him to the 8th floor, where Jonathan Blake was waiting. Welcome, Jamal, Jonathan said, his voice carrying its usual confidence. Ready to get started? Jamal nodded, his palms sweaty but his determination firm. More than ready. Jonathan led him through the office, introducing him to team members, explaining projects, and outlining his role in the internship. The work would be challenging, but Jamal was no stranger to hard work. By lunchtime, he was already immersed, taking notes, asking questions, absorbing everything he could. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. While Jamal was stepping into a new world, Trey and his crew were slipping further into the old one. Word had spread about Jamal's internship, and the reactions were mixed. Some people admired him for it, while others, like Trey, saw it as a betrayal. He thinks he's too good for us now, Trey muttered as he and Marcus sat on the steps outside the corner store. Like he's got some golden ticket or something. Marcus sighed. Man, maybe he just wanted something better. Trey shot him a glare. You sound just like him. Marcus didn't argue. Deep down, he knew Jamal had made the right choice. And for the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he should have done the same. That evening, Jamal sat at the kitchen table, exhausted but smiling. His mother watched him, pride shining in her eyes. So, how was your first day, baby? She asked, setting down a plate of cornbread. Jamal grinned. It was amazing, Mama. I learned so much already. Angela reached over, gently touching his cheek. I always knew you were meant for something great. Jamal looked down at his hands, the same hands that had fixed a stranger's tire, the same hands that had almost been tempted by a quick, dangerous path. But now they were hands building a future. He glanced at the business cards still sitting on the table, now a symbol of something much bigger than an offer. It was proof that doing the right thing always leads somewhere better. And for the first time in his life, Jamal didn't just hope for a bright future. He knew it was coming. The weeks at Blake Innovations flew by faster than Jamal expected. Every day was a lesson in discipline, ambition, and possibility. He soaked up knowledge like a sponge, learning not just about business but about life. Jonathan Blake wasn't just a CO, he was a mentor. He saw something in Jamal that the boy was only beginning to see in himself, potential. One afternoon, as they stood in Jonathan's office overlooking the city skyline, Jamal finally asked the question that had been sitting in his heart. Why me? Jonathan smiled. Because I saw someone who reminds me of myself. Jamal's eyes widened. You? Jonathan nodded. I wasn't born into wealth, Jamal. My family struggled. I had to work twice as hard to get here. And I remember what it's like to stand at a crossroads, just like you did. Jamal thought back to that moment, the choice between Trey's path and his own, the temptation, the doubt. And now, standing here, he knew he had chosen right. One evening, after finishing work, Jamal walked past the basketball court near his block. Trey and Marcus were there, the same way they always were. Trey barely looked up. But Marcus met Jamal's gaze, and for a brief second, there was something there. Regret. Curiosity. Jamal gave him a nod. If you ever want to do something different, you know where to find me. Marcus hesitated. Then, slowly he nodded back. Jamal didn't push. He had learned something in these past few weeks. You can't force people to change. You can only show them what's possible. And maybe, just maybe, Marcus was starting to see it. Later that night, Jamal sat in his room, staring at the stars through his window. He had always thought life was just about survival, about getting by. But now, he understood something new. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about choosing who you wanted to become. His journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges. There would still be moments of doubt. But now, he knew that every choice mattered. And sometimes, doing the right thing, no matter how hard, could change everything. The world is full of choices. Some are easy, some are hard. But the hardest choices are often the ones that define who we truly are. Jamal chose integrity over shortcuts, kindness over selfishness. And because of that, his life changed forever. The next time you face a difficult choice, ask yourself, who do I want to be? Because that one decision might change everything. Choose wisely.